Out of all of the trends that have emerged in our recently woke society, the one that's made me lose my hair for good is cancel culture. For those of you that don't know, cancel culture refers to the idea that anyone or anything that's ever done, said, or otherwise been associated with anything that could be considered offensive in any way is now to be placed into the spotlight and excoriated ad nauseum. But of course, it's not enough to just publicly shame that thing, whatever it is. We also have to revise it for our new ever-so-enlightened society. And if it can't be properly updated, then it needs to be completely deleted from all of human history. And should you offer a counter-argument, or God forbid, say that you actually like this thing that's now considered sociological heresy, well then prepare to receive the scarlet letter of racism, bigotry, sexism, or just being branded a curmudgeon that can't adapt to this refined new age. Want some examples? Well, I talked about this one on my podcast back in early 2011. The Canadian government's Broadcast Regulatory Committee, known as the CRTC, banned the song Money for Nothing by the Dire Straits because of this verse that contains the word faggot. Fortunately, about 8 months later, they lifted the ban. I guess they figured that a 26-year-old song at that moment that had already been played countless times and probably wasn't seeing that many spins by the early 2010s wasn't really that big of a threat to society. But don't tell that to program directors and general managers of radio stations here in the United States. They decided that banning the song might be a bad idea, but editing out not just the word faggot, but the entire offending verse was a much better solution. Try as you might, you'll never find a dumber species on this planet than radio station program directors and general managers. With the possible exception of radio consultants, that is. By the way, you've got to love how broadcast companies like Entercom and iHeartMedia will edit the Dire Straits, but they'll play songs that refer to women as bitches and whores, talk about illegal drug use and committing various other crimes. But yeah, let's be sure to edit that 35-year-old song. Keep it up, terrestrial radio. You guys are doing great. Of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Various celebrities, from Sarah Silverman to athletes like Milwaukee Brewers pitcher Josh Hader, have had their tweets from as far back as 10 years ago become the center of controversy. Apparently, there are people out there that will dig through your old tweets looking for something offensive, and then when they find what they're looking for, they'll get offended and cry about it until someone pays attention. Now, I'm not defending every comment that people have made in the past, but if someone wrote something offensive years ago and you survived all this time without it bothering you, then I think your sensitive little heart will be just fine. And that brings us to one of the latest victims of cancel culture, The Simpsons, specifically the character Apu Nahasapeemapetilon. This is a controversy that really goes back a few years ago because of a documentary produced by filmmaker and comedian Kondabolu called The Problem with Apu. I'll go ahead and spare you the 49 minutes watching this and let you know that Kondabolu thinks that Apu is a disrespectful stereotype toward Indian and South Asian immigrants and should be removed from the show. He outlines all the usual arguments about how stereotypes are bad, how they hurt people as well as society, brings in some anecdotal evidence, yada yada yada. Some people, including fans of The Simpsons, evidently agree with this guy, with a number of blog posts and articles asking Fox and the creators of The Simpsons to get rid of Apu. And you know how the internet works by now. A few blog posts, some tweets, and that's a representation of what the majority wants. Am I right? Well, congratulations, squeaky wheel. You've got your grease. Apu is gone. Well, kind of. Hank Azaria, the actor that does the voice of Apu, says that after much consideration, he won't be doing the voice any longer. Now, what the writers of the show and the Fox network ultimately decide to do with the character is out of his hands, but whatever it is, he won't be doing the voice. Savor your moment of victory, social justice warriors everywhere. You earned it. Oh, but before you put those pitchforks away, I did find a few other Simpsons characters that embody some rather harmful stereotypes and tropes, as well as potential negative influences on society that you just might want to have a look at. For instance, there's Groundskeeper Willie. He's a surly, unintelligent, violent, grease-hoarding Scotsman that speaks with a typical Scottish accent. And then there's Fat Tony and his gang, because all Italians are wrapped up in organized crime, right? Well, there actually is one other portrayal of an Italian on the show. Luigi, the owner of the Italian restaurant, an obvious Chef Boyardee caricature. He speaks with an over-the-top Italian accent like this, not the least bit offensive at all. And then there's Barney Gumble, a morbidly obese alcoholic that's never had gainful employment outside of briefly operating a snowplow and an episode where he made a short film. How can depression and alcoholism be funny? For shame. They portray the elderly as cranky, senile, and frail who only live to watch Matlock and Wheel of Fortune. Evidently, they think all Brits have terrible teeth. All police are donut-eating, out-of-shape, incompetent dicks. How about their portrayal of every Southerner being a redneck with far too many children, not enough teeth, and with that Southern drawl? And then let's take a look at a couple of the main characters, like Homer Simpson, for example. A borderline alcoholic with an obvious eating disorder who punishes his son by strangling him. And speaking of his son, let's talk about Bart. A male character voiced by a female? What? Bart vandalizes property, bullies his sister, does terrible in school, and is rarely punished for his behavior. Well, aside from the aforementioned strangling, that is. But yes, do go on about how Apu is a bad stereotype. By the way, let's take a look at who Apu's character is on the show. Well, he's an Indian immigrant who became a U.S. citizen, has a college degree, owns a small business, makes a pretty good living, is articulate with a better command of the English language than most of the other characters on the show. He's also faithful and religious. Man, what a terrible fucking stereotype. You guys are right. I can see why you want him off the show now. Maybe it would have been better if they had cast him as a guy working in a call center doing tech support for Microsoft. Oh, and just an FYI, most Indian immigrants in the United States do have college degrees, make over $100,000 a year, and are more fluent in the English language than native speakers. I don't know, kind of seems to me like the Simpsons hit the nail on the head when they created Apu. But imagine if the Simpsons didn't have Apu, Carl, the Bumblebee, Fat Tony, Luigi, Lou, Smithers, or any other non-white or non-heterosexual character. Then these same people would be screaming that there's not enough cultural representation on TV, not enough diversity. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. The Simpsons is one giant stereotype. I guess that's why I've never been much of a protest kind of a guy, nor do I get offended by entertainment. Because being a warrior in the social justice army is basically a full-time job with high stress, no pay, and no benefits. If you're going to be upset by one stereotype, then shouldn't you be upset by them all? Or is it a case that it's funny when it applies to a group that isn't your own, but it suddenly becomes not so funny when it applies to your nationality, religion, gender, sexual preference, or disability? I'm not sure how a person that claims to be a comedian like this Hari Kondabolu doesn't get the satire and humor of The Simpsons. But then again, the world is clearly full of double standards, like this entire social justice and cancel culture movement. I mean, really, who the fuck is this guy to say what should and shouldn't be acceptable? Well, I find it offensive, therefore you should too. I don't like it, so it shouldn't be on TV anymore. You know who else talks like this? Children. Let me tell you how this works. Here in adult world, when we don't like something or we find it to be offensive, we just don't watch or consume it. And if enough of us decide not to, then that thing goes away. It's pretty simple. If you don't like it, no one says you have to partake in it. You're all grown up now. You get to make these decisions for yourself, but not for everyone else. And I know what some people will say. Sounds like you support racism, sexism, discrimination, and you think it's okay or funny. There's a big fucking difference between entertainment and the real world. But it's pretty hard to see that when you live in the nosebleed sections of the far right or far left margins of society. Maybe if you guys got this outraged about non-fictional shit, we wouldn't have such a massive discrepancy in pay between men and women. We might not have people being discriminated against every day based upon their race, nationality, or disability. What I'm saying is, with all of this free time that some of you have to protest, if we focused it properly, we could get some serious shit done. Or you could keep spending your time writing angry tweets, posts, and blogs about TV shows, songs, and movies. Fortunately, it's not like there's some killer virus going around with a healthcare system that has terrible infrastructure and a market in free fall while a complete sociopath is overseeing all of it. But yeah, nice job getting a character removed from a cartoon.